Welcome to Horror Makes Us Happy, the podcast where we ask the question, what is it about horror that makes us happy? Your hosts are Steve Becker and myself, Chris Whitman, and you can find out more about us at our website, horrormakesushappy.com. We talk about messed up stuff. We will be talking about horror culture, horror themes, which could involve sensitive topics such as murder, rape, child abuse, foul language. We will be talking about bad things, but in a civilized way.
Hopefully.
Yeah,
maybe.
For the most part.
No promises.
I'll try and keep it civil. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's see. Coming up, we'll be speaking with authors Sarah Langen and Max Booth III and director Eduardo Sanchez. But today, we have the pleasure of the company of another author, Hailey Piper, known for such works as Queen of Teeth, Your Mind is a Terrible Thing, and The Worm and His Kings. I love those titles. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Max. No, not Max. Josh Mailerman had suggested you to us. Mm-hmm. Did he tell you anything about the theme of the podcast or what we do?
Josh? No.
Just threw it to the wolves. Basically, I think we may have had a conversation about this.
Yes,
but maybe not.
We did.
Okay. Yeah, so, we'll ask about childhood, teenage years, adulthood, but it's not meant to be a therapy session. So if there's anything that you don't want to answer, just say pass and we'll move on.
That's easy. I don't remember a lot of things.
That's going to make this a quick call.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what do you remember? What are your first earliest memories of scary things?
I mean, for me at first they weren't scary, but they were monsters. Like I was like, even from 3 years old, I was a Godzilla fangirl and just obsessed. But the first, actually, now that you're asking that, I was going to go for the movie that my sister and I shouldn't have watched when I was 5. But I think even before that, we had accidentally stumbled upon Are You Afraid of the Dark? Which I don't remember what episode we saw that had us hiding under a blanket. But I just remember there was like a field and a guy with an axe and the kid was running away from him. And that was enough.
Okay. I can understand why.
Yeah. It's pretty terrifying.
Yeah. I mean, for like a 4-year-old, it's kind of, that's a bit intense. But yeah, later, the big thing that I remember was my dad had brought home a blank VHS that was supposed to be from a coworker who had recorded the movie Troll off the TV. And it was like, that should be okay for kids. You'd think I assume that wasn't the movie that was on the VHS. It was The Unnameable, which is a hard R movie from the late 80s based on a Lovecraft story.
Yeah, that's I think that was recently acquisitioned by Unearthed Films. That's pretty hardcore and a nasty trick. Like, yeah, we're gonna watch Troll. No, we're not. We're gonna watch, I don't know, Visceral.
Well, he put the tape in and he hit play and then he left the room and then he came back a while later and
to find you guys just jaws on the floor.
I was into it until that night when I had to go to bed.
Oh, of course.
And then it was no sleep for a while. And then me asking my mother questions that she couldn't answer because she did not watch the movie.
So how did you even know that it was supposed to have been Troll on there? Did your father tell you? That's
what he told us he was bringing home. And it was just like, okay. And so I was like, it said The Unnameable and I was old enough to read that. And it was just like, sometimes the Disney, this is a weird comparison, but how sometimes the old clamshell VHS Disney videos had like a little cartoon first.
Okay.
I kind of thought maybe that was what it was.
This is the preview.
Yeah, this is just the Pixar short at the beginning of it. Yeah,
right.
Sure.
So this is a bit before Pixar, but so I'm just waiting for this little, The Unnameable, like a little spooky thing before the movie. And it just kept going. And then there's nudity and like guns and people getting their heads cut off. And like, you've got like kind of a monster POV, shaky cam a la Sam Raimi. And it just kept going. It was not a short.
just wish I could have seen the look on your dad's face when he walks in. Like, that is not a troll.
He apparently, at least he told us, I overheard him telling my mom that he shouted at his coworker the next day. It's like, what the fuck do you show my kids?
Yeah, that was one of my thoughts too. Is like, was that an accident or was that in purpose?
We never know. I'll never know.
Wow.
I mean, it's hard when you had those old ones. You were recording stuff off the TV. Like I think you record off of like this old school HBO. So
or just grab the wrong tape by accident.
Possibly. Yeah. I mean, I used to do that. I record over because I would try to record Monster Vision off TNT, and I'd accidentally record over one movie with another. I didn't mean to. It just, it happens. Maybe if we'd watched the end of The Unnameable, like the credits would have cut out and then it would have just been blurring into like tracking into the credits for Trolls.
Right. That's what I thought you were going to say when you brought up the preview animation. Like maybe the preview animation from a Disney film or Troll, if there was one, was on there and then it was recorded over as The Unnameable for the rest of it. Like, psych.
I'll be honest, like from what I haven't seen Troll or Troll 2, but from what I know of them, like I'm not even sure those are appropriate for
like after that experience.
But
not
you have
really
like, a way to know that, and like honestly, everything was scary in the 80s.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't watch Goonies when I was a kid.
Goonies was scary. It had skeletons and that organ made out of skeletons where the floor fell.
There's just a lot. Like I mean, you can name a bunch of movies that were supposed to be for kids back in the 80s, and it was just like, this is a lot. I mean, try to, like, if you don't know what's going to happen later in E.T., like the part where Elliot and him meet in the field in the middle of the night is terrifying. Yeah.
E.T.'s come up a couple of times in some other interviews, I think.
With Troll, it sounded like, I'm wondering if you were already into horror at that point, and so your father was bringing that home for you because he knew you wanted to see that, or was that just like a random?
My little sister and I were asking for scary stuff, and it's kind of trying to ease us in, which is not how things turned out. But no, I think there was already an interest in kind of like darker stuff, Harryhausen movies, Monster Squad, Goosebumps, like all that stuff pretty early. I know the next time I saw movies I shouldn't have, and that was when I was 9, because and I remember this because it was all in one weekend. We rented just a bunch of them. They let me pick them out. That was not smart, but I was fine. Like I don't know if I should have been fine, but it was my first time watching the 70s Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Ooh, with Donnie Sutherland.
Yeah, and like I haven't seen that since, and I'll never, like, at this point the ending has been memed to death, but like I'll never forget. I would have never forgotten the ending anyway.
Yeah.
Carnosaur.
Okay.
Because this was like that gap period between the first 2 Jurassic Park movies, and it's not like you get dinosaur movies every year. Right. So it's just like I needed something. I'd already watched the Valley of Gwangi and a bunch of old stuff that wasn't really doing it. It's like Carnosaur came out the same time as Jurassic Park. It should be just as good, was my logic.
Yeah. High production value.
I mean, I appreciate Roger Corman, but yeah. And the last one was my first time watching the original Night of the Living Dead.
Okay. This is all at 9? Yes.
This is all the same weekend when I was 9.
Oh, wow.
And all of these are like, I was not scared, but I was kind of in like a funk after that weekend, which I don't really remember that, but like, I don't remember why or like what happened after, but I just remember that was like the general sense, because all 3 of those movies have extremely downer endings, and they're all pretty intense.
Yeah, that could affect the kid, at least for a day or 2.
Yeah.
Should have bounced back.
I mean,
let me ask. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, I agree. It's especially not just the fact that they're, a bunch of horror movies. Those do all have a kind of negative downer ending. So, yeah.
Oops. Luck of the draw.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. It was just bad luck.
I wanted to ask, I don't know if I misunderstood something you said before, but I thought you had said that you had an older sister and then you mentioned a younger one. Did I misunderstand, or do you have both older and younger sisters?
No, I mean, I've got a complicated family.
Okay. We have a minute. I mean,
I have various step siblings, step half siblings.
Got it.
It's just complicated.
I can relate. My father and I'm the only child from my mother and father, and then they both got remarried and had kids with different. Yeah. Well, the lead in where I was going with that is normally we ask if you had any other friends or family that were horror fans at the time, either, parents or siblings or cousins or what have you. And it sounded like you at least had one sister. Was there anybody else in the family who were horror fans?
Not exactly. Unfortunately, I was very much kind of like mostly watching this stuff on my own after a certain point. At a point where one sister like kind of didn't really have much of an interest, although we would always watch Halloween on Halloween.
As is tradition.
Yeah. And I mean, to this day, that's still a comfort movie. Like I can just throw that on in the background and it just like, I just kind of enjoy having it on. Mm. And I don't have many of those. Usually if I put on a movie, I want to watch the movie. And I can still do that with Halloween too, as well. But it's just like, it can also just kind of be a background movie. It just has an atmosphere to it. But I have an even younger sister who kind of glommed onto, and like she would be like, I was asking like, I want something scary, and like, adults didn't really know what to do with that. And she would ask me, I want something scary, and I was like, okay. I got a couple things. Because by the time she was asking for that, I was a bit older, so I was like, I only had like 4 DVDs, but one of them was The Thing.
Nice.
So it's like, yeah, we can watch this.
So you had kind of a horror protege, if you will.
Mm-hmm. It was just me, her, one of our cousins, and I think my younger brother, but he was not supposed to be in the room, which I didn't find out till the next day when I was told, don't let him watch things like that.
Like, well, you're a little late.
Sorry. Did you participate in Halloween as a kid?
Yeah, for a bit. I don't know. I was not super creative about that stuff at the time because I was just kind of trying to figure out, like, what do they have a mask for? So it's like, they have a dinosaur mask. Okay, I'll be a dinosaur. They have a gorilla mask. Okay, I'll be a gorilla. They have a Grim Reaper scythe. I will be a Grim Reaper. Like, I wasn't really kind of coming up with my own stuff very much.
Mm-hmm. I mean, at that age, you don't have to.
Sometimes it's lack of resources, lack of imagination, sometimes it's lack of both.
Mm-hmm.
That's true for a lot of people. You never know. There are a lot of questions that we're going to ask that you may not have good answer for, and that's okay. We just ask because you never know what's going to hit and what's not.
Yeah. I think the worst decision I made with Halloween is when I hit 13 years old and decided I was too old for it. Mm-hmm. That was a bad decision.
Why?
Because I should have kept doing it. I should have just kept going. Yeah, well, just for the candy. And also, I think I took for granted that Halloween was going to change because, you don't really see as much kids going around neighborhoods anymore. Now, a lot of times it's like malls or other things. And I'm just like, I think if I'd known that the Halloween as I knew it growing up and as I had seen in like, movies and TV from, dating back 30, 40 years. If I'd known that was all going to go away, maybe I would have kept going with it more just to kind of, just to get to experience it a little longer. Because you get this idea, like, I was in a rush to grow up for one thing, but also like, as an adult, looking ahead, I was like, okay, well, as an adult, I will be able to look back and be kind of like, there are kids doing it too, like just as when I was younger. And that's just it's not the same anymore. And you definitely don't get like just a roving band of kids. Like there's always a chaperone.
Yep.
I mean, we had that, but not the same, like kind of with the kids. Like we had an adult who was like,
if they're really young kids.
Yeah, they're really young kids. But like when we were like 9 and 10, like we had like an adult with us, but they weren't with us. They were like, like 10, 20 feet
5
back.
houses back.
Right. It was kind of just to keep an eye on us, but it wasn't to kind of, be there with us so that we could still have our kids' Halloween.
Just to make sure we weren't causing problems for the adults, not the other way around.
Right. But you know what I mean? Like, and that's not really the case anymore either. It's like it's glued to the kids these days. And I get why, but it's still kind of sad.
Yeah, no, I agree. For childhood, at least, did you have a favorite costume, least favorite costume?
No, they all kind of sucked.
I can relate. Mine were not that great either.
My mom tried really hard. I remember she was trying to make this dinosaur tail work like hell, and it just would not stay together. It just kept breaking, and I'm just like, there's nothing on her. It was just like it just wasn't doable.
I can relate. Sometimes you have a great idea for a costume, and then you go to apply it, and it's just, this is not going to work.
Right.
Not with what I have in hand.
Right.
Did you have any really scary dreams as a kid? Any reoccurring dreams?
I don't know. I had this weird, ongoing thing when I was younger, but it wasn't scary. It was kind of just
reoccurring.
Yeah, well, not reoccurring. It was more sequential, but I don't really remember it very well. There was one really scary one where I mean, my house was in the woods.
Okay.
And I remember I thought this was real, what was happening. Sometimes you have a dream and you kind of can tell it's a little flighty, you're not quite trusting it. You don't know you're dreaming necessarily, but everything's kind of dodgy. This one felt vivid. I believed this. I had found some secret government facility, from Alice Stranger Things. And I probably got that from reading Watchers by Dean Koontz. But I was for whatever reason, wandering the woods at night, which is not something you do in that area, or at least not back then, and found some secret government facility. And for some reason I was able to get inside, and there was this giant hairy thing hunting everyone inside. And I couldn't get out. And it was just a matter of kind of hiding behind walls and holding your breath so it wouldn't hear you. Yeah, that was terrifying.
I wonder what inspired that dream sequence.
I definitely feel, now that we're talking about it, I feel some of the government facility stuff was from Dean Koontz's Watchers, but I don't know where the hairy thing came. I don't know why it was in the woods behind, my house. I don't know.
Do you remember Gossamer from Bugs Bunny?
Did it look like Gossamer?
That would have been hilarious in hindsight. But no, it was like a bear mixed with Bigfoot kind of thing.
What was the one you mentioned? You had another one that was sequential?
Yeah, but that wasn't scary. That was just weird. I don't really remember it very well. I just remember that it was a thing for a while.
It's pretty cool to have a sequential dream, though. I don't think I've ever experienced that. And yeah, much like my misjudgment of night terrors earlier on in one of our episodes, where I'm I'm jealous of that. That'd be cool. I've never had that happen. I have rescinded that opinion now. But yeah, the sequential dreams, I'm also kind of jealous of that, because I think it would be cool to come back to a dream and be I remember this place. I've just never had that.
It makes the real world feel less real.
Yeah.
I've got to say, because it feels okay, I'm just wandering into another place.
Yeah, exactly. It brings a continuity to the dreamscape.
Right. So, and then it kind of then you start getting into second world fantasy, like Narnia and such, which probably, I almost wonder if that helped lead to kind of depression later, because it ends up making everything really disappointing.
It does, doesn't it? Oh, we're back here. Anybody got any ether?
It's hard to compare when you're in some illogical dreamscape that you keep wandering into, and then it's just all right, time to go to school.
I've also had sequential dreams like that, but they're not fantastical. It's hard to describe. It's almost just like real life, except they're stories involving people and characters that aren't really happening in real life. But it's one of these weird things where I'll be dreaming, and there are times when I am capable of doing lucid dreaming, but when these kinds of dreams happen, I don't go into lucid dreaming because I think it's reality until I wake up, and then I realize, oh yeah, that was this other story that's kind of going on. But I don't know about you, but at least in my case, it's nothing really fantastical or special. It's just this weird other narrative going on. I don't know.
Lucid dreaming has been hard because the couple of times it's almost happened to me in the dream, it's wait a second, I'm dreaming. And instead of taking advantage of that, I just go, wake up, and then I wake up. which I have no idea why that's my inclination to do.
Fight or flight, I guess. Like your brain says,
I
you're
guess.
dreaming, it's time to wake up.
Yeah.
Maybe. Did you have anything actually terrifying happen in real life in childhood?
It's kind of hard to say sometimes because, sometimes something feels frightening, but it's not actually like threatening, but you don't know that.
Especially when you're a child.
Right. And especially like, I've told people before, like, with living in the woods, you kind of look out from the back porch and like you see the trees at the edge of the yard and everything beyond that is just a black curtain. And like, that's scary. It can't help being scary, especially when you're younger, because it just goes on for miles and miles. Yeah. I mean, there's, I don't know. I can think of a lot of times where I was afraid, but it's not the same thing as what you're asking, I guess.
It's like no chance encounters with bears through the woods or anything like that, right?
Oh my God. I'm so glad that never happened.
Yeah.
I mean, they come to the house, but it's not like the kind of bears where you're like, oh my God, it's going to get in. It's black bears. Like, they're pretty small. It's not like we got grizzlies.
They just want your garbage.
As far as I'm aware, and I don't want to know different.
You're right. Some guests have like a visible defining line where prior to this line, they were scared by horror. And then after that line, they are now enjoying it. The things that you've mentioned here, everything from Godzilla. I think Godzilla, you said you were enjoying.
Right.
But the other stuff, you were scared. Do you remember there being a defining moment where prior to that, the stuff was scary and then after that it was fun? Or,
I mean,
has it always been a mix?
I think it really depends. Yeah, I think it's always been a mix. And that's to this day. Like, I think I could be wrong. Like the last movie that really scared the shit out of me was It Follows.
There were some tense moments in that movie.
I could feel my body, like my muscles relax when the movie ended because I'd been tense for so long.
Right? Like it's actually relieving when you feel like your back and neck unclench. Right.
Yes. And like, but the thing is, I still seek that stuff out.
Oh yeah.
Like I mean, yeah, I don't know if there's ever a defining line. I think on some level the scariness is part of the fun. Like I'll watch horror comedy and I'll watch like fun horror, but I also want to watch like serious horror, depressing horror, scary stuff. And you never know what's going to do it for you. Like, I mean, I know people who watch the 80s remake of The Blob and it's just a whatever movie to them. It's like that movie is one of the most uncomfortable sits of any fucking horror movie to me.
Still
and
awesome.
I love the hell out of it.
That phone booth scene, I mean, just what they were able to do with practical effects on the 80s Blob.
I'm so impressed.
Just amazing.
I'm so impressed with it, but like I have to kind of gear myself up to watch it, but I do want to watch it. I do enjoy it. I have a good time doing so, but I am so disturbed through the whole of it. Like that's one of those movies that just really bothers me and I know for some, but it's different for everybody. Like the Saw movies are what really get some people, but those kind of bore me. Like they don't scare me. I'm just not super interested. Whereas something like The Blob is going to be like, some people are just going to shrug at that. For me, that's going to set that's going to make me clench my teeth.
Any idea why?
I mean, I can describe why the movie is horrifying. And that's the other thing. Like I've had people who like, they don't understand horror that well be like, it was good, but it wasn't scary. So was it really horror? And it's like, that's not how that works. Yeah. All the stuff the Blob is doing, people seems like incredibly painful.
Yeah. It's like on the same vine as body horror. It's invasive.
Oh yeah. It's invasive. It's digesting you. Like it's inside you and you're inside it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's intense. It feels like, I like the old Blob, but like, it feels like the kind of thing you can get away from pretty easily. And this Blob is so fast. I get uncomfortable watching it, but I don't know. Maybe this is really going out on a limb, but like, maybe it's like something related to, I don't know, genetic memory. It's just like, you remember that there were creatures that we used to be and down the evolution line that would be digested by like large algae or even further back single cell organisms.
Well, no,
I don't know. That's really
you
really
might be
a
onto
stretch.
something there. The whole point of this show is getting to the root of what it is that draws people to horrific things, and maybe it's like a evolutionary fight or flight thing from when we would attack and be attacked by other creatures.
Yeah.
I mean, we're capable of being attacked by other creatures right now.
Yeah, true.
So I think you had mentioned, looking back at this list, Godzilla. I think you had said you were even enjoying that at 3,
Mm-hmm.
but it also sounded like you had said that there was something predating that.
Well, I think I mean my very earliest memory is still involved with liking dinosaurs, and I think Godzilla was a natural extension of that.
Mhm.
Incorrect paleontology and all.
Right.
So dinosaurs, then Godzilla, and then everything else. But I mean, I still love Godzilla.
Yeah, that's a natural one for a lot of kids for a number of different reasons. The ability to let loose and destroy things that, kids typically are told to, sit still and don't touch anything.
Also the music.
I think that's why the Gremlins have an appeal to kids too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they're like mischief iconified.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Don't do this thing. Okay. Moving into teenage years, what were some of the more impactful stories or books or movies that you encountered in your teenage years?
All right. My memory is a little bit more dodgy as we get into teenage years, but I'll do my best. Definitely Hellraiser.
Mhm.
Okay.
I think I saw that when I was 13 or 14.
Nice.
Definitely earlier than expected, but they were playing it on Sci-Fi Channel like all the time, so it's kind of hard not to end up seeing it.
Mhm.
And I wasn't like I was avoiding it, so like that was not just like that was a game changer in the sense of like that kind of that second world thing we were talking about earlier, where it's just like that was when I was like, oh, our reality could be paper thin, and there could be other things on the other side of that, and they could want in, and they could want to take us away to it, and like there's just really like opened up my mind beyond the other deep themes and such that Clive Barker was getting into with that was like the immediate thing that really just like completely shook my imagination.
Yeah, it's that immersion into another realm or another world where you're not in Kansas anymore.
Yeah.
But yet you are.
Ah.
Books wise, I had stopped reading for a while, and then I forget. I think my grades were bad, so I wasn't allowed to play video games for like a couple months. And I kind like, you get to a point where you have so much assigned reading in school that you don't really, they kind of ruin reading for you.
Yeah.
It's like, here, you spend all your free time reading these crappy books that nobody would actually want to read. Maybe that's not everybody's experience, but that was like the kinds of books that they were assigning us, which I can't even remember the titles for at this point. During that period, my mom got Dreamcatcher, which is not the best Stephen King book, but I think it does kind of like get at his deal, if that makes sense. And I read that pretty quickly, and at that point, that was my first Stephen King book.
Oh wow, good one.
I'd read a bunch of Dean Koontz when I was younger, but that was when I kind of tapered off reading. It's like Dean Koontz, R.L. Stine, Michael Crichton, like all up to like 10 years old, and I kind of stopped reading until like for a few years, and then my mom got me Dreamcatcher, and then I was like, I want more Stephen King books. And the funny thing is, I'd known about Stephen King's It from when I was little. For some damn reason, one of my elementary school teachers brought it up in class, like, told us about it, which was like, I don't know how other kids felt about it, but for me, I was like, but I want to know more. It wasn't like crystallized into a sentence like that, but that was the feeling in me. And like, it would keep coming up. Like we would be in one of the video stores, and like I would see the box for the rent, like the miniseries, like I think it was like a double VHS or something. I can't remember.
Yeah, something like that.
And then like I would be at like one of my mom's friends' houses, and like they would have it on a bookshelf or even on the coffee table. And this was like through the 90s. Like, and so, that was a bit after the book had come out, but it was still, people were still reading it. And so I was kind of asking about it. I remember when I was little, and my mom was like, no, I think that's too old for you. And so instead getting me Dean Koontz, because that's appropriate.
That was a good decision. Yeah.
Well, you're saying you're reading that stuff up until age 10. I'm going, 10's pretty young for Dean Koontz and Crichton.
Yeah, but I wasn't supposed to be reading it at first anyway. It was, Crichton, I didn't understand everything, but they're really, like, if you look, at least as far as I can remember, there wasn't really anything inappropriate in Michael Crichton's stuff. It was just complicated.
There's just that one part about a dinosaur slashing open a man's stomach and his intestines falling into his hands and feeling the warmth of his intestines. It's good. It's good for kids.
Well, okay, American views of appropriate.
Right.
There wasn't anything sexual in Jurassic Park.
Sure, you're right.
I can recall.
In that regard, no.
And same with like Sphere, Congo. I forget what else.
You didn't have access to the internet and the fanfic.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
No. We got the internet pretty late compared to other people. But Dean Koontz was a different story. But I wasn't supposed to be reading that at first. I don't know why. I was in my mom's room. At that point I was reading voraciously. Like I was eating through an adult novel a week, and I'd run out of books. And so I was in her room and I saw Mr. Murder, and I just started reading it. And I was about halfway through, and when she finally saw that I was reading it, and she's like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah." And it's like, "Okay." And she just let me keep reading. And from that point, I was picking up her other Dean Koontz books, like Watchers that I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember. There was another one that she had that I picked up, Lightning. And but she started getting them for me. And we Intensity had just come out. I don't know if you know what that one's about, but it's essentially this woman is staying at her friend's house, and somebody comes through the house and murders everyone who's supposed to live there.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget why I think she's hiding in something, and he ends up driving away, but she's there, and she realizes that he has some little girl captured, and she's got a bunch of problems because her family, or like her parents are abusive and stuff. And it's not a book for kids, but like my mom finished reading it. And then because throughout her reading it, I was bothering her. It's like, "Can I read that when you're done?" And she was like, "Well, let me finish." And then she finished it, and she's like, "Yeah."
Huh.
So,
okay.
I don't know if that was appropriate, but like, I think she was just happy I was reading, honestly.
Yeah.
But I think that was kind of how it was at the time. The one that was really inappropriate, though, was The Voice of the Night. At that point, she was buying me like the mass market paperbacks of Dean Koontz, just kind of trying to pile me up with them so I wouldn't have to be constantly asking for more books.
Mm-hmm.
And so she wasn't reading them first. She kind of just trusted that I had a good understanding between reality and fiction, and I did. But that book is about a disturbed child who is killing animals, kills his baby sister, like tries to sexually assault this girl at school.
Oh.
And I was okay when I finished it, but I was just, even at that age, I was still like, I shouldn't have read that.
And who was the author with that one? Was that another Dean Koontz?
That was Dean Koontz, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, like that was a big backtrack to just kind of like all the Dean Koontz I was reading when I was like 10.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I'd heard about Stephen King's It through all this time. But for some reason, Stephen King's It was too much, but those were fine.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so as a teenager, when I finally got to read Stephen King's It, and that was another big change because it was so layered and imaginative, and like it had the whole like I don't think I'd read a book with the back and forth kind of parallel timelines before, where it's like the kids and then adults and the kids and the adults. And I ended up reading like the last 200 pages in one sitting. Like I was up till like 2 a.m.
Wow.
And it was just, I was like, my mind was blown. Like I was like, that was the point where I was like, I knew I wanted to write. Like I'd written before, like little stories here and there, but that was the point where I was just like, I want to make people feel like this made me feel.
Okay. I mean, it's cool that you got a moment where you experienced that. A lot of people just, like for me, I just wandered through life until I was like my 30s and finally found something that went, oh, this will work for me.
I mean, it was a long time of like learning to write.
Mhm.
And
Right. But I mean, even just knowing that you wanted to do it.
Yeah. It was it was a neat experience, and it was just I could feel everything so acutely through that book, and it was just and then, like, that's one of those things Stephen King does, which I don't read much Stephen King anymore, but I was still like I voraciously was eating through those, like, The Stand, The Mist, still not even like scratching the surface of all the many, many, many books he's written, but that was the big one.
I want to go back to something that you had said earlier. So you mentioned finding Mr. Murder in your mom's room, and then, a number of other things after that. And so now I'm wondering, questioning what you had said earlier about not having anybody else in the family who was a fan of horror, because...
That's true. Okay, I guess I was thinking movies, maybe. She didn't think of them as horror, though. Though she kind of thought of them as thrillers, which that was a very, like, that time, like, horror was a bad word in publishing, so I'm not surprised by that. Everything was being marketed as thrillers.
Mm-hmm. Suspense.
Yeah, like, well, because, like, there was the big, like, horror crash, of the mid 90s, and then suddenly it was like a race for publishers to rebrand everything as a thriller, because they were like, horror's done, horror's not going to sell anymore, we gotta market these differently, or just cancel these contracts, like, don't publish these books. And that lasted for a good long time, like, to the point of, like, bookstores not even having a horror section.
Yeah,
like, I had to go searching for Stephen King books in, like, the general fiction.
Yeah, the whole political atmosphere in the US and often kind of screws with stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Not just in literature, but music and movies and all kinds of stuff.
Oh yeah.
So teenage years, you said that you had stopped participating in Halloween around 13 years old. Did you have any scary dreams at that point in your life, or any recurring dreams then?
I can't remember. Like, I was like suffering from severe depression through a lot of that, and that kind of like deletes a lot of your memory space.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, fiction stuff is easier to remember from that time, just because those were kind of like the escapes. Whereas if you ask me, like, what were you doing at this time? What were you doing this time? Like, I have no memory. It's just gone.
If you don't mind my asking, in a general sense, generally speaking, was there a particular trigger for the depression? Like, with parents getting divorced, or, death in family, or something?
Yeah, those things, but, like, there was other stuff too. I mean, it was a lot of problems, and some of that's just inherent too. Like, sometimes you just have a problem that's not being addressed.
Mm-hmm. General teenage angst. Or,
it was also just, it was not a friendly time to be queer. You kind of had to keep that under your hat a bit. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, just a lot of things
that can add to it too.
Yeah.
Let's see. Anything actually terrifying happened in real life in your teens?
Besides high school, nothing particularly stands out. I don't think. I mean, didn't have any near-death experiences, or anything. At least not like something immediate. But yeah, I don't know.
Going back to what you said about it and how it made you want to write, and the experience you had in, say around the last 200 pages, obviously there was something good there. You were talking about things like the layers and the chronological writing. Often when we talk to creators in the business, there's two parts of being a fan. One part is your emotional response to the content, and then the other part of it's sort of meta commentary, or the auteur part of it, where you're realizing what's going on at the auteur level and being a fan of that. Do you think it was more the latter with it, or like a combination of the two?
I mean, I think the actual structuring stuff isn't something I could appreciate until I got older. Like, it's not like, I'm sure that is part of what I thought so highly of, but I wouldn't have been able to articulate that at the time.
Describing it better now.
Right. I was kind of just, when I was younger, I knew that what I was reading was having an effect on me. I was just in the journey on that level. Like, and I couldn't be like, oh, it's so smart how he weaved the end of this section of the kids into this section of the adults and makes it feel like it's all happening at once. Like I couldn't really, I didn't really have an understanding enough of it to peel that apart. I was just like, for me at the time, the structural stuff and the way it was written was, meshed together with the emotional stuff. And I kind of look at that way these days too. I want that all to feel cohesive when I'm creating things. Like I don't want you to be thinking about how the special effects are done while you're experiencing them.
Right.
If that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. It's more a job well done if your readers or viewers are just so wrapped up in the story that they don't think about things like that because it's just that good.
Yeah.
I understand. What I'm struggling with right now in terms of, this call is that trying to dig to the heart of what a person really gets out of horror, at least in my experience, I'm finding that the emotion is like that saying with Watergate, follow the money. For me, it's follow the emotion.
Okay.
And like the only thing that we've really talked about, I think so far in the call where emotion has come up has been the 80s remake of The Blob, where you're talking about gore and pain and invasive.
You want me to get into what emotionally resonated with me about Stephen King's It?
Please.
Okay. I will say that emotion is going to be top priority for me when I'm experiencing something and when I'm creating something. So yeah, that's going to be the big deal. So, there was a sense of awe when I was reading it. We spend most of Stephen King's It in Derry, like in a solid world of Derry. And the only thing that's kind of, more surreal or disconnected is Pennywise himself. But then you get down to what happens way below the town. And that's when it punches through into cosmic horror. There's the intense, opening of space within Pennywise, at least the way it's presented with the, as far as the human characters can understand it, even though that's technically this microverse, macroverse thing that Stephen King gets into as far as the universe is this one thing and there can be a passageway outside of it, inside of it. And these were all new concepts for me. I never read H.P. Lovecraft when I was a kid. And even then, I still think this was more sophisticated in a lot of how it was presented, the extent that it was going, even though understanding that Stephen King might not have been able to get to that point without that foundation. And also, so there was there's wonder and awe within the horror. And also, just emotionally being invested in these characters. You've journeyed through them for essentially what are their lives. You've seen who they were before they really knew each other. You've seen them after they've been all split up from each other, in this big confrontation with something they thought they understood to some extent, but really they hardly understand at all, but they're still trying. And then you have multiple emotional things going on. In adults, you have them trying to make sure this is never going to happen again. But on the kids, it's the same, it's on that same level differently. The adults are stomping it out, literally. Whereas the kids, they feel a level of responsibility where they cut their palms and make a blood oath to come back if it's not dead. And that was what my biggest disappointment with the miniseries, of many disappointments with the miniseries. When I watched it probably a year or so after I read the book, was the kids kind of just come away from their final confrontation with Pennywise and just but if it's not dead, we're going to kill it. And it's just it's not it's just kind of moseying through that part and not really understanding how significant that is to make that kind of promise as a child. Whereas then you got the 2017 movie where they do it and you can feel the severity. You can feel how much this matters and that they understand it matters. And things like that really resonate with me because I think kids have a keener understanding of the injustice of the world. And sometimes that comes out in a way that adults, dismiss, like, it's not fair or whatever. But I think on other levels, they really do understand that there's just this there's a wrongness to things. And a lot of people telling them, it's like, well, that's just the way it is. And you can see that personified in Derry, in the town, just in how much people look the other way when anything bad is happening that's being influenced by Pennywise. It's just and even the town itself makes the rest of the country and the world shrug it off too. Like they even say in the book, if 9 kids have been murdered in the 1980s section of it, that should be making national news, but there's nothing. I think that kind of speaks a lot to how everything feels like when you're a kid, when you realize something's wrong and just everybody just goes along with it. And there's this kind of madness to adulthood where we just are complicit in it. And that's why I get emotionally caught up in this stuff, because it's like, you kids are right to be angry. You're right to be severe and take this seriously, where everybody is telling you you're wrong.
Justified. All good stuff. I guess the one big emotion, well, the two things that I'm hearing in there are the sublime and grief. The sublime for, opening up into the rest of the universe that you mentioned, going through the sewers and Pennywise leads to, and then the grief about a number of different things, relating to adulthood and how the world handles things. I think what you touched on in terms of kids being more aware of the unfairness of the world, that's where I was going with the grief. I think that's, what was it? There was something I read or saw within the last week or two where somebody's kid was acting out, or somebody's adult, there was some adult acting out maybe, that we were talking about it and saying that, somebody didn't tell this person no when they were a kid. And so we got the feeling that this person hadn't learned how to process their own grief over not being able to have everything in the world that they want, and that's a reality that some kids face very early on in life and some don't.
I mean, I don't know if that's exactly how I'm looking at it.
No, I didn't mean it that way. I was kind of going off on a tangent. Sorry. I also noticed there was something that you said that reminded me of what you said about the house you grew up in the woods, and there being sort of like a boundary.
At least it felt that way.
Right. What was something reality paper thin? Oh, Hellraiser. That's what it was. Mm-hmm. There was sort of like a common thread there, and possibly also the same with it.
Yeah. I guess I like that kind of stuff. As scary, it's one of those things where it's like, it's scary, but I gravitate towards it. Like the idea itself is horrifying, but at the same time can't stay away.
Right.
There's an allure to it, despite the awfulness of it.
The sublime is something that I appreciate in horror as well. Probably the thing that I like the best is when it touches on that kind of stuff. And Chris is probably sick of hearing me mention him, but one of my favorite authors is Joseph Campbell, who talked about not only the sublime, but in general grief and things like that, and understanding that these things are a part of the world, and that if you don't want to accept those things, you just want the things that you like in life, but don't want to accept those things, that it's in a way, it's almost denying life. Getting to a point in your life where you can accept that, okay, there's these good things and there are those bad things, and it's part and parcel, and you can accept all of it in a way it's affirming life, which is a good thing. Did I lose you?
No, I mean, not like technologically, maybe otherwise. I'm not sure I'm following. I think that I do understand what you mean about affirmation of life. I think that when you're younger, you have I mean, this, not that I think, I know when you're younger, you have more energy, at least for me. But I think that, a lot of our energy gets spent up on so many little things that we kind of forget our power to improve the world. Not necessarily in a way that there can only be good things or that we can have everything, but just in the sense that things don't have to be as bad as they are at times, that we can, make a difference. And I think kids to some degree still believe in that, which is why something like, what happens with the kids in It is so powerful, because they cut the cycle short with Pennywise. They do make a difference. They believe in that, and they are able to accomplish that, which is something that's not typically the case with a lot of people. And as we grow up, some of the beauty of growing up is that you have the potential to do so many more things, but on the other side, you have less energy to do them. And there is some level where you become complicit in these things because it's considered that the world is this machine that has to keep turning. And that doesn't necessarily have to be the case, but it is the way it is. It doesn't have to be, but if everybody agrees to it, it becomes a choice.
Yeah. Okay. Nothing in real life that scared you in teenage years, at least nothing that affected you long-term. Adult years, you mentioned It Follows was the last movie that scared you. What other stuff in your adult life has been influential?
I mean, a bunch of things have been influential in their own way, but another one that scared the shit out of me was The Descent.
Mm-hmm. Just the claustrophobia of it,
Before and during Monsters part, but definitely, the part where she gets stuck.
Yeah.
Nuts. Yeah.
Scenes like that are exactly why I will never go caving. Oh, right. You mean I get to squeeze through this space here that's just big enough for my entire body, and we're how many miles below the surface? Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely not an experience I'm ever going to subject myself to.
I don't suppose you're claustrophobic.
Not generally, but perhaps squeezed between rocks under the ground.
Yeah. In that situation, you don't have to be claustrophobic.
I'll make an exception in that case.
It makes you claustrophobic.
Yeah, right.
Even if you get out of it now, you didn't have a complex before. Now you do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. After you'd pointed out the I forget the wording, but maybe I shouldn't have said influential, but more like in terms of impactful on being a fan.
Yeah. It's hard sometimes. You don't have a list of every movie, but those two definitely stand out. I'm trying to think of stuff that unnerved me. Those are definitely the big ones.
Anything else about The Descent that stood out to you other than the part where she got stuck?
Oh no, the whole movie. I think the whole movie's pretty good. Up to the which ending did you see? This kind of ends up being an issue.
UK ending, best ending.
Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen it each way, and I'm just I don't know if there's a right ending to this. But honestly, it's such a good movie that I don't think that even if it doesn't perfectly stick the landing, that it is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I enjoy the stuff with the cavers. The part where the first one, actually the first one shows up when she kind of sort of sees it.
Mm-hmm.
That's disturbing.
Yeah.
I honestly, in adult life, I'm finding that I feel like there was a point in my early 20s where I was demanding perfection out of movies for some damn reason. And they must be executed like this. And it's I don't know if that's the internet's fault or whatever. But as I've gotten older, I'm kind of just I don't really care if it's good. I just want to have an interesting experience.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things. I think that's another thing. There's a lot of demand for realism these days. And I'm no, I don't want that. I want stuff that this that feels like a dream almost. I want stuff that it doesn't have the same logic as our world, so you're not really sure where it's going to go sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I feel in a less pretty sense, I get I had not seen any Cronenberg movies up until recently, except for The Fly and A History of Violence. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of been trying to catch up with Cronenberg, and his movies are not pretty like that, but they have that same thing of they don't feel like they're operating under the same rules as our world. The Brood, the Rabid, Videodrome. Like there's this, whatever agreement there has been dividing like the fantastic and reality, that agreement has been canceled.
Yeah, Cronenberg kind of plays by his own rules.
Yeah. And just, there's just that blending that is attractive in the sense of, I'm not sure what, maybe it's the sublime. Maybe it's that again, it's just not as apparent as something where it's like, oh, the yawning open outer space. It's not maybe as in your face as that, but it still might just be that sense of like separation that's still kind of this gives a sense of wonder.
Makes sense.
It's funny that you say that because I was coming to a similar thought myself. The word I was going to use was precipice.
Yeah.
I was thinking about when you said in the Cronenbergs, the agreement has been canceled in terms of, not operating under some of the same rules. And I was thinking, okay, well, where does that take you emotionally? And possibly the response there would be the fear of the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that fear of the unknown is, again, don't want to speak for you, but for me, it's that same feeling of being at the precipice of where is this going? What's going to happen? Like feeling about the fall, not knowing what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And in the word you used was separation, because, what is on the other side of that moment?
I think I'm not always afraid of it though. The unknown doesn't bother me as much because I feel like I've lived a lot of my life with that. I feel like a lot of us do, whether we realize it or not. And I think while there is a fear of the unknown, it's also like sometimes the unknown isn't a bad thing. Sometimes the unknown is a Christmas present.
Yeah, it can be the comfort of the unknown too. Like just not
right.
Not
because it's a separation from, like, if you know horror, especially like here's a good example. Like a lot of people who aren't typically into horror have been turning to horror since the pandemic started.
Yeah.
It's like because they know this horror, they know what COVID can do to you, but this other stuff is the unknown, and there can be a comfort in that. Although I will say The Brood was pretty disturbing, or not The Brood. The Brood was disturbing. I loved it, but like Rabid, I was watching that during the pandemic for the first time.
Not the best time.
And I was just like, this is from the 70s. Like it felt so on the nose, with like down to such little things like the vaccine cards, and then people making a big fuss out of that. And yeah, it was just that was a little bit of a trip at the time. It was just that was where it was becoming too much more real. It's like, no, give me more unknown, give me more fantasy.
More escape, please.
Yeah, right. I like the phrase that you guys were talking about, the comfort of the unknown, because that makes me think for a minute. If the known that you have already experienced has been a horrible thing, then yeah, there can be a comfort in the unknown, because in some sense you might be thinking, okay, this might actually get better.
Yeah.
Or at least different.
Yeah.
Right. Which could be better.
And that's also goes into like a common thing being fear of the other, and like that can be subverted with just being the other. But sometimes it can be like, well, if the familiar sucks, then maybe the other isn't a bad thing. Like that's definitely not that it works out for him, but that's definitely where like Frank is going in Hellraiser.
Yeah.
When he starts playing with the box.
Yeah, I suppose you could say that, because his current life is that terrible that whatever is in this box at least has the chance of being better.
I mean, the promise on it is hollow.
Yeah.
But he doesn't know that.
Yeah.
And Frank does not have the self-awareness to realize that he's the one making his life terrible.
Yeah.
But just as an example.
That last sentence kind of brought me around, because I'm thinking to myself, I didn't think that his life was that terrible. I thought he was like seeking something out. But as you say, if he's not aware that he was the one that was making it bad, that kind of ties it back. I mean,
there's clearly a desperation to him when they're when Christy and her dad and Julia are going through the house, and there's all these like I can't even count how many like Jesus statues there are. Like there's clearly something else was going on before he even got the box where he was desperate for something.
Yep.
Maybe it was just my youth, but I read that as lust and drug addiction.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, like the first thing that Christy's dad says when they get in is like Julie asks, "Where's Frank?" And he's like, "I don't know, probably in jail somewhere."
Yeah. Have you started participating in Halloween as an adult?
Not really. I mean, we kind of just get excited about it each year. Like October is Halloween. I'm much more obnoxious about it.
Nice.
What do you mean?
Plastering it all over social media. It's like, it's our time. It's our people's holiday month.
Yep.
Like just being like generally excited.
It's that time of year. It's acceptable to binge watch 15 horror movies in a row. Yay!
Yeah, right. It's like I'm just doing what I do all year round, but now all of you have to hear about it.
Exactly.
And I mean, also just, again, I had depression for a very long time. There wasn't really the ability to get excited. So as much with things, now I'm just like, it's freaking Halloween. Go whole hog. We decorate and stuff, but like, it's one of those things with the trick-or-treating, like, kids don't come by.
Yeah.
But, you do what you can.
Right. I think I forgot to ask, in your teenage years, did you have anybody in your teenage years that were fans of horror? Like, did you have any kind of social group, or were you just kind of like doing your own thing with it?
I think I was just doing my own thing. If there was, I do not remember.
In adult years?
I mean, the horror community online has been fantastic. My wife has kind of like, she's into it, but not like with everything. Sometimes I kind of like watch something first to see if it's something she would even like. But sometimes I go in blind and I'll be like, oh, this is something I probably would have not suggested for you, but she loved it. So, but yeah, so, it's kind of like, that's kind of our thing. I try to corrupt my nieces and nephews, and
Chris can relate.
As you do.
Yeah, my cousins, like my cousin, I tried so hard with my cousins, but like they were just too scared. Like not everybody's got the whatever it is that drives us towards that stuff. Not everybody's there. I tried to get them to want to watch Killer Clowns. They didn't want to watch Killer Clowns.
It's whimsical. It's a kid's kind of movie, It's got cotton candy in it.
Okay, we were watching Spirited Away, and that was too much at certain points.
No,
so I was
it No Face?
Yeah. Which is, it's understandable.
Yeah, it is.
Especially since so much of that movie is so sedate, and then suddenly there's just a big glob monster that's mostly mouth chasing Chihiro.
Yeah, that kind of comes out of left field a little bit.
Right. Although funny enough, like they didn't care for that. Loved Princess Mononoke, which has a lot more violence to it. But you can never tell with anybody. Like I used to, when I was a kid, like when I was very little, I remember I didn't mention this because I didn't watch the movies at the time, but like I couldn't even stand the commercials for Child's Play movies.
Oh, really?
Like I was not about Chucky back then.
Wonder why?
Probably because I had a doll that was kind of the same size.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was enough.
Also, maybe the whole Uncanny Valley thing, is...
Right. So I shoved that doll under the bed, which is the smart place to put something you're afraid of.
Well, yeah. Chucky dolls, clowns with telescoping long arms for no reason. Yeah, you put it under the bed.
Yes.
I love Poltergeist. Oh, that was, I saw that when I was 8, I think. And like, I just fell in love with it completely. Like that was, to me, that was one of those ones, again, that kind of like bridges this into this sense of wonder. Yeah. While also being really fucking scary.
What was it you were wondering about?
Oh my God. I'm blanking on the character's name. This is terrible.
Carol Ann?
The medium.
Oh, damn it. Now I'm blanking on it. But yeah, her.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Like she had such a presence, and I still feel this way as an adult when I watch that movie. It's just like she just makes such an impact the moment. Like you feel the tone of the movie shift the moment that she comes on screen for the first time. And she speaks of like
very serious.
Right. And like there's this sense of ghosts throughout, but then when she talks about what's going on, you feel that there's this other world. Like there really is this other layer of things on top of it all. And I couldn't articulate or really understand that as a child completely, but I did know that there was more than I was grasping. That's one of those things with that allure of the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
Was it Tangina?
Yeah, I think so. That sounds right to me. So let's just go with it.
Okay, sure.
I don't remember that.
Memory like a steel trap
Google.
when it comes to horror movie stuff sometimes.
Well, my phone is on airplane mode, so I can't check.
It was Tangina. I looked it up.
Okay.
Okay, that's interesting. Kind of ties back with what we were talking about earlier about the there were a number of things, but the one that's coming in mind first is the house in the woods and in the line of the trees.
Yeah, I don't think I ever looked at it that way. Maybe if I go back there someday, I will. And then you'll never hear from me again or something. But
Yeah, right.
we did have ghost stories up in that area, though.
Yeah?
Yeah, the one that I remember most clearly was there was another town that was way deeper in the woods that kind of like, this was old. It was old and then like was slowly abandoned and like the houses all collapsed except for one. So you kind of have this like section of woods where you're coming through the trees and then there's this house. I just preface this. I never went there. This is all secondhand, but supposedly people would go out there and they would like kind of not necessarily dare, but it was kind of like just one of those things like, you know, spend the night there. And like supposedly you could hear babies crying in the woods, that the place was haunted by the town that used to be there.
Yeah. Was the word Croatoan written anywhere?
No, this is in New York.
Okay.
But yeah, it was that creeped me out. And like we had a family member who was like, oh, we should go there. And I was just like, no.
Right. Like, I'm good. No.
Yeah, I'm good.
Pass. So the last questions, maybe like 10 or so questions here at the end. These cover your entire life, not just any particular section. And it's not just about horror, so this could be opened up to other genres too. But the first two questions I'll ask at the same time because it could be the same answer for both or it could be different. But if we were to ask, what is your favorite movie and what movie have you watched more times than any other, what would those be?
I think the movie I've watched the most is Jurassic Park. Just because I saw it so young and I've had the opportunity to watch it so many times.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but that's the one off the top of my head that sounds right. My favorite movie is Mad Max Fury Road, though.
It's good.
Okay. I'm guessing with Jurassic Park, again, the dinosaur
Yeah, thing. I mean, it's just and that's again that sense of wonder. Like they're so big and so interesting, and you know, they're mysterious for us because we will never experience them ourselves.
You know, fun fact, in my interview, one of my early fears was Jurassic Park. Because that is interesting. To me, it was possible because it's not like, you know, monsters or aliens from outer space. It's people fucking around with science when they shouldn't be. And I thought, like, that's totally something people would do. So I would just sit there, like, paralyzed, falling asleep at night, looking at this little cup of water that I had on my desk. Like, is it going to ripple?
That's so funny. And just like for me, though, I was like, how can we make this happen?
You're like, no, this needs to happen.
Right. And I think that's just the different like mindsets to these things where it's like, and it's the same reason that not the same things aren't scary to everyone just because we approach things differently.
What about Mad Max Fury Road? Why is that your favorite? It's
just really engaging for my wife and I. That's both our favorite movie. We get so completely sucked into it. And it's definitely one of those things where we probably read more into it than we should, like as far as character motivations and like emotional turns and things like that. But like, it's a deceptively deep movie, I think. Like it feels very simple on the surface, but there's actually a lot going on. It's just not spoken.
Could be. Since that's what I wanted to ask you. I forgot to ask about the when we were talking about the social aspect. I was thinking also because, you know, now that you're a published author and you probably got, you know, friends in that realm. Where along this did you actually start writing and getting published?
I mean, I've been writing since I was like 8 when I first tried to rip off Jurassic Park with Cretaceous Park.
Okay.
Which I thought because it was 8 pages on my computer, that was pretty much the same length as the Crichton book.
More or less.
Right.
At least it felt that way, writing those 8 pages.
Yeah.
So I've been writing since then, but I hadn't really had anything published until 2018. That's when like I kind of was coming out of depression. And I was like, I feel like writing again. So then I did, and I started submitting short stories to places.
Well, I mean, still 4 years or so of the social aspect is helpful, better than none. We like to ask that because, there are some people who they have a friend from early childhood that is right there along with them, or maybe a family member. And then other people, they were on their own, or they'll have a friend in childhood and they kind of goes away in teenage years and then comes back in adulthood. There's a lot of different potentially interesting journeys that are available out there. Do you see any common threads about what kind of horror that you like? Cannibalism, occult, metaphysical?
I mean, I think there's definitely, now that we've talked about it and dissected my interests on here, I think there's definitely I do seem to gravitate towards this otherworldliness, this sense of wonder, this sense of separation, which is funny because a lot of the stuff I read is very down to earth, but I kind of read it also always kind of wondering if it's going to make a sudden turn into something else later on in the story.
You're looking for it.
Yeah, I mean, if it doesn't happen, I'm not necessarily disappointed unless it hints that it's going to happen, then doesn't. But I'm always kind of ready for it. I'm always ready for it to just suddenly kind of take me somewhere I'm not expecting.
Any idea why it is that you like that?
I don't know. We've dissected it so much. I'm not sure there's a straight answer to anything. I mean, I'm the kid who was just like, how do we make Jurassic Park happen? I mean, I've just watched a movie and read a 400-page book where it's clearly a bad idea, but at the same time, it just, just feels like we should be able to do this. Yeah. So honestly, I'm probably Pandora in the sense that I would fucking open the box.
No, I agree with you. That's one of those questions that it's hard to answer because
I think it's just the kind of person I am. I want to see what's next. I want to see what's over that precipice, over that hilltop. I want to know those things, or if I can't know, at least experience them.
Right. And that's a very human thing. And I don't know that you can dig any deeper than that. I think that is a common human element of, like you say, we do want to find out what's on the other side.
I would sympathize with the mad scientists in the movies. When I mentioned John Carpenter's The Thing, but before that I loved The Thing from Another World, and I sympathized with the scientist in that who was we have it's a creature, it's the only creature we know from another world. We haven't even tried to communicate with it, and I know he gets killed, or I think he or knocked out. I'm not sure. It's been a little while, but I sympathize with him. It's we it's contact from another planet. Exactly. I know he's right. I know he's killed a bunch of people, and it wasn't until later I realized that the alien had strung people up upside down to have them drip blood into plants of itself so it would grow more of them, because they don't show it on screen, you just hear about it. Oh man, if they'd put that in a 50s B movie, if they put in a 50s black and white horror movie, that would have been incredible. But no, I didn't realize that until later. But as a child, I was like, what if there's never another chance? What if there's never another chance to try to relate to this, this other creature, this person? It's clearly a person. He flew here.
Right. It's clearly sentient.
Right. It's not like the xenomorph where it's it's smart, but it's probably just an animal, right? You're not really certain. So it's just I sympathized with that because it's we need to try to talk.
Hope. Are there no other genres that can scratch this itch, shall we say, of, particularly sci-fi, I think is the first one that comes to mind in terms of exploration of what's out there. You could also go with fantasy, like you mentioned Narnia, I think earlier in the call.
I think horror is the most honest genre. I think on a character level, you see people as to who they are when they're afraid.
Okay.
And on a audience and creator level, I think that you can touch on things that are more uncomfortable subjects in other genres.
Mm-hmm.
Horror also, because it's such an atmosphere thing, can be mixed with any other genre.
Yeah.
I've mixed in sci-fi, fantasy, mystery, romance, crime. Like I've mixed in every genre I can think of into horror and want to continue to do so because it blends so well with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that through horror, you can do that exploration. Through horror, through those other things, you can still do exploration. But horror is something that can just touch everything.
Yeah, and I mean, reality isn't always going to be positive. So if you want to be, like you say, horror is the most honest. If you want to be honest about the reality of what could happen,
or even the unreality of it.
Yeah, it's like it's the most unforgiving, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's just with certain things, you kind of get a sense of like how it's going to go, or maybe not necessarily, but like horror is really just there are no rules.
Yeah, there's more potential in that respect too.
Mm-hmm.
I guess really the last question then, is there anything else that you can think of that's relevant that we haven't talked about? Is there anything that maybe while we were talking you thought about something but then it didn't come up in conversation?
I mean, I kind of just jumped to each tangent that I thought of, even if it was out of the sequence of events. I was like, oh, let's talk about Dean Koontz for a little bit. Oh, let's talk about Godzilla for a little bit, just jumping to each thing. So no, I pretty much, whenever something you said sprang up a new thought, I just jumped for it.
It's okay. Tangents are not uncommon in this show.
No, I figured that was encouraged.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I completely forgot at the beginning to give you a spot to pitch
whatever that's right.
we're going to be working on. Normally we do it at the front and the back, but forgot the front one. So
sure. Sorry. I've got my second novel is coming out on September 20th. No Gods for Drowning, which is a horror, noir, mystery, dark fantasy book from Polis Books.
Okay, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's something that's kind of been in the back of my head since I was younger, and it's just finally now getting to come out. But and then I've got short stories and stuff, Other Terrors, The Hideous Book of Hidden Horrors. I have a novelette in that. And next year, my horror Western comes out from Death's Head Press, and that's Cruel Angels Past Sundown.
I like horror Westerns.
Yeah, they're neat. That's also one of those things where it's like, it feels very down to earth, but then it could turn in any direction. And then I'm at www.haileypiper.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at HaileyPiperSays.
Cool. And we're going to put together a bio page for you so we can link to them there.
Oh, thanks.
Well, thank you to everybody out there listening. Please do come visit us at horrormakesushappy.com. You can check out Hailey's bio page there and any other the sub pages that we have, merch, Patreon, what else, about us, social media, all kinds of good stuff. If you like what we're doing, tell a friend.